Hi Dollhouse friends, welcome to this video of my process of trying to put finishing trim on the edges of my dollhouse right here. Here is the beaded trim, finished and painted. This video will take you through all my trial and error of getting that done. So come along for the ride. This is the same paint I use in my house on all my trim. It's called Swiss Mocha or something. I'll have to look that up. I got it from Home Depot. It was actually a color that used to be sold on the shelves, and eventually they discontinued it, but I'm still able to get them to make it up for me because I'm still in the process of painting various trims in my house, and we're gradually replacing windows, and so those trims all need to be replaced. And I just keep a little bit in this little half-size jam jar for use in my dollhouse. But that got a little thick, so I added just a bit of water to it and stirring it up really well to thin it out, and I'm going to continue painting the trim. Begun playing with the trim. You can see here, I think you can see the trim that I'm using to finish off these raw edges of the dollhouse, which I think it's just like MDF board or something. I'm not even really sure what that is, but it's not, it doesn't take paint smoothly on these edges. Some of them are kind of striped and stuff, so yeah, so I've been playing with this trim. Now I have these, if I back this up a little bit, you can see I have these weird angles. So the rooms aren't all square. There's this bump out here. So I'm having to figure out how to address that when I'm cutting these strips. And believe me, I am not doing this perfectly at all, but it's, you know, I think, as my sewing teacher used to say, a galloping horse will never stop to notice. So here is the trim that I'm using, if I can get that to focus. And if you can see that there's like this little, little beaded pattern in here. So I've got these painted up. They all have 2 coats on them. I'll probably put a third once I do a little bit of filler in some of these spots, like right here. I'll probably, you know, it doesn't meet quite perfectly, so I'll probably just do a teeny bit of detail sanding and some filler, and then I'll do a third coat all the way around. So what I did to get the angles was I took some paper. I just have this little mini notebook here that I think they're flip pads or something for cartoon drawing. I don't know, I got a hold of them somewhere. And I laid them up here. Let me lay them here and I'll show you what I did. I've got them laid so that the edges line up exactly with the surface of my roof. This is how I'm going to figure out my angle. I'm going to tape those in place, and I'll use that to figure out how to cut my angle. So I'm just taping the 2 pieces to each other. So I just have this little piece like this. Okay. And it should work on all of these angles. So those angles are all the same. I'm not, you know, if you're mathematically inclined, you'd probably know what that angle is, and I don't. Now I'm going to tape it on the back too. Just to make it a little more secure. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it right on the point there. And then right to where the 2 pieces meet on the other side. Okay, so see what I've done. So now I have a folded line that goes from the indent to the point. Right. Now here I have my miter saw, gentleman's saw I think it's also called. Put my glasses on. It's just a little box. There's some scraps here. A little handheld saw, and there are these slots that you put the saw into. It's meant to go on the edge of a desk or something, but my desk is, you know, pretty cheap, and this finish is going to wear badly, so I've just got this block of scrap wood, and there's a lip here that I just put that against, put it on there. So what I'm going to do is check this this angle to see what the angle is, and all right, so it appears to match this one right here. Not the wider set one, but this one right here. So these are the two slots that I'm going to have to use to cut these pieces. I'm going to put this on here. I'm going to leave myself just a little bit at the end, a little bit of extra that I'll cut off after. That way if I, you know, screw up or anything, I haven't wasted a whole piece. And I'm going to mark on here exactly where my point meets. And this is not something I was doing in the beginning, but try to do it on the top and the bottom, and it's really hard to do. I missed. Okay, there we go. Okay, because you don't know which way you're gonna have to put it in the saw until you get. The little mark is right here, and I need the angle to go this way. Okay, because you figure the inside of your house, when you're angling it, that's the shorter piece. When you add to it, you're expanding the house, you're making it bigger, so your bigger edge has to be out here. So my angle needs to go in that direction. So I'm just going to give myself a little pencil mark just to remind myself where it's going. Okay, that's going to get cut off, so I'm not worried about that showing. Plus I can erase it. And then I have to figure out which way it goes in the saw, and that's always a challenge. So I don't want to cut this flat. Obviously I can't get the angle. And I need to really support this very well, because I do find that it is splintering a little bit. Alright, so there's my inside and my outside, so I want the angle to go this way in here. I'll hold that up so you can see it. 1 second. So I'm following that angle. Oh, except that's the wrong one, because we need the shorter one. So I'm going to have to turn this over. I'm going to have to turn the piece over, I think. I don't know why I struggle so hard with these angles. That doesn't work. Okay, here we go. There we go. Okay, so I've got the shorter edge against there, and then this is going to angle out to the longer edge. So I did have to turn the piece over. Right, then I put it in the saw. And when I saw this, I'm going to get this at an angle. I'm going to only do pulling, because I found that if I just sawed back and forth, that it ended up splintering the wood a little bit. So I'm just gonna pull it against the wall that it's braced against. It does cut pretty easily. I'm sure this makes a terrible noise. Yeah, so sort of like 4 strokes and I'm through. Okay, so now you can see I have an angle like that. And I'm going to take that back over to the doll. So I'm going to line that up right there, make sure that my angle is precisely lined up with the point, and mark where I need to trim off that. And this is just a straight cut, so that's really easy. Okay, push this against my saw block. Okay. And again, I'm only going to do pulling cuts, no pushing cuts. Because I don't want to. Yeah, even there it's still kind of splintered a little bit. And there just really isn't much of anything I can do about that. I mean, I'm just going to, it's like a hangnail. I'll pull it off, touch it up with paint, and it'll be good enough. People won't notice things like that. Glue on everything and push this on here. Now this is just a little bit wider than the piece I'm covering, so I am making it flush along the top and letting it overhang on the bottom just a little bit. I'm going to press that in place to give it a little grab. Just hold it for a few seconds. Make sure it's all flush along there. I love the way this is looking. It just finishes the house off so nicely. Okay, I'm going to put tape on there. Piece is big enough. Okay, I'm just checking as I go along with the tape to make sure that I'm not sliding things out of position, because that happens really easily. Make sure it stays nice and flush with the top. Feels good. A couple more pieces. And I usually leave these overnight, just because that's when I get back to them. I'm not sure it needs that much time. Oh, it's always so much fun to... Next piece here, I'm going to have to cut that angle in the opposite direction. So I have the angle that I trimmed it off from. And I'm going to take that to the saw and do that in the opposite direction. So I'll just cut a little bit off, fix that angle to the other direction. And that will fit. If you're lucky, it'll just, oh, it notches in beautifully. Okay, well, not perfectly. It's, the ends are, that end looks a little rough. I'm going to just take a little bit of a detail sander to that and just smooth that off a little bit. So that piece goes right in there, and this is not a perfectly, exquisitely smooth join right here, but as I say, I will touch them up with detail sanders and some filler as needed to get them as close to perfect as I can, and and actually it's just kind of like you can almost bend it and just bend that end into place. I think that the ends, when I cut them, it's kind of spreading the fibers of the wood a little bit. But I think we'll be okay. All right. So I also need an outward angle on this end here. So I want to find my exact spot. Two dots. I'm going to cut that. and then I'll continue around the house that way. Had some technical issues with my recording, so because, you know, I'm technologically challenged, so I don't have good recordings of a few things that I actually wanted to show you. But let me show you a couple of other things. I wanted to show you, this is the inside chaos of my house right now. More like a storage shelf for things, but I've got had a few new pieces of furniture that I've purchased lately that I really like. Isn't that cute? It has kind of a faux marble top, like that one. I got two different desks. This one is fairly simple, sort of a, I think I would call this a craftsman style, maybe. Working drawers, even these tiny little drawers right here. They're so small I can barely get my fingernail on them. Those work. Little slots for papers and things. I thought that was really cute. I think this might go in an older child's room. Possibly even in the housekeeper's room. There's a housekeeper in this dollhouse. Here she is down here, working away. But you know, she's my family's nice. They treat her well, and she has a nice room. This is the other desk. Oh, get that out. This is the other desk that I got. Also has teeny tiny little working doors and a little working cupboard, which I thought was nicely detailed. I don't know if you can see how fine the detail is on these legs. And I mean, these are slightly more expensive pieces. They're not, you know, $300 or something like that, like the really fine artisan stuff. But I do think, I do like them. I do find them, you know, pretty well made for what they are. Maybe walnut. I'm not quite sure what they're made of. It's one thing I find with the wholesalers when I buy these pieces. Usually with an eye to, you know, using them in my dollhouse, but also is this good enough that I would want to list it in my shop? And in this case, yes, I do want to list all of these in my shop. But it's hard to find information on the pieces. The wholesalers don't really list a lot of information about where they're made or what they're made from. So, you know, how big are they? So I don't always know what I'm going to get. This is another one. I like the shape of this. I don't know if you can really see, but these drawers are a little bit, the dresser's a little bit curved on top, and the drawers are a little bit curved, and it came with this mirror, which again has some really lovely little details on it. So yeah, so those are my newest pieces, and all of these are ones that I will be eventually listing in the shop. And my battery has started flashing already, so I'll be right back. There's one more piece that I just got recently. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get this to show up on camera very well, but it's this cute little coat rack. And I think the details on this are really nice. So next time I order from these two companies, all of these things will be items that I'm going to add to my shop. Now they're at wholesale price. They're even a bit, you know, expensive for me to start listing, so there probably aren't going to be a lot of them in the shop initially. I mean, I may only put 2 of each in the shop to start out with. One of the wholesale companies I deal with is overseas, so it'll be a while before I get that. I have to have a good size order for them because the shipping is quite expensive, so if I'm not ordering a number of items, it's just not worth it. But within the next few months, these will all eventually appear in the shop. Okay. Now, I also wanted to just share these. I am so excited about these. So I have an aunt who's an artist. She's one of my favorite artists because I she's just a great person and I love her, but also I just genuinely love her work. And I asked her if she would do something for my dollhouse. And, you know, I gave her an approximate size and said, you know, the period of the dollhouse that I was working on and what I wanted it to do. And she actually sent me 5 teeny tiny little paintings. Let's see if I can focus in on each one. Here we go. So here's the first one. Little shore scene, a lake or an ocean scene. I would guess probably a lake with some sand. I don't know, because of that tree. I'm not sure a tree like that would be so close to an ocean. And she lives, she actually lives on the edge of a reservoir, small reservoir, so she has a lot of this kind of thing in her work, as she gets a lot of inspiration from where she lives. I love the use of color. I mean, look at the pink sky. You know, it just, but it works. It's beautiful. This is another little village scene that I just absolutely love. And I think this might be my favorite of these. Just this sweet, very simple little subject, but I don't know, it's just, I get lost in this one. Just so beautiful. So I will be making frames for all of these at some point, and I will have these throughout the house. If I ever did sell the house or anything, these would not go with it. I don't think I'll be selling that house anytime soon because it's probably going to be a work of a lifetime, but these 5 paintings will stay with me forever. So, you know, I've got one bit here where I probably should have really redone that one. I may even take this small bit off right here and redo this because that just came up a little short, but I'm gonna first see if I can fill it with some wood filler, with a little wood filler and sawdust, and then, you know, if it'll fill in well enough that I can paint it. Yeah, some of these edges are just kind of like a little less than perfect, but I think that with a tiny bit of detail sanding and some wood filler, I'm going to be able to make these look good enough that unless somebody is right up nose to nose with it, they're not going to see. They're going to see the overall effect of this trim. But I really do like that trim. I think it just is finishing off these otherwise, you know, pretty ugly edges, and I've gotten a fair way around. But again, I ran out of this trim, and that was my fault. Normally I like to make sure that I have plenty of trim. Here's an example of the ugly edges. You see, they weren't gonna, they're just rough, like plywood MDF board edges, and they weren't gonna just take paint and look nice. So I needed to cover them with something. And I normally try to make sure, which I didn't do with this stone, that I have plenty of materials for something. Because I have this dread of getting partway through something and needing more of it and finding out, like I did with the stone, that it's all of a sudden not available. That happened with the paint up here. I just bought some and then I loved it, and then I had to scramble to find some. So, you know, after the paint, I kind of made a point of making sure that I could get what I needed, that there was plenty of it. I had plenty on hand, even if I ended up with a little bit too much. And I thought I had done that with this trim, but I didn't calculate for, like, I calculated my total number of total length that I needed, but didn't factor in that, you know, once I cut a couple of pieces maybe out of a length, I might have a leftover piece, but it wasn't going to be long enough to use anywhere. So I really needed quite a lot more for waste than I calculated for. However, I was able to get it. The company that I get this from is a store in Canada, in Toronto, and thankfully they must live really close to Buffalo because they ship from Buffalo, even though the store is in Toronto. So I don't know if they have a workshop in Buffalo or if they just drive over to Buffalo to do shipping in the US, because the shipping is, you know, remarkably cheap when it's coming from another country. But anyway, I've ordered a bunch of that, so I should be good to finish up the house. I hope. I don't know. Now I'm wondering, did I order enough for the bottom? I'm not sure. I may need to order even more. But I do still have some. But they did seem to have enough. If worse came to worse and I have to do something different on the bottom, I could do just a plain trim on the bottom and not have the oval inlay. But anyway, I'm really excited because, you know, that won't be here till next week, but I do have next week off, so I'm hoping I can get it painted and get the rest of that trim on. And then all I've got left to do is figure out what I'm going to do for porch railings and columns. I don't know yet what I'm going to do. I haven't really looked into that yet. And then I have all of the widow's walk rails to do around these areas, and I think that's going to be pretty challenging, so I've been putting it off because I'm kind of dreading it. But that's where things stand with the house. And then other than, you know, the windows and doors, I will have pretty much finished the outside. And I think, as I said, in an earlier video that I'm not doing the windows, even though I'm trying to finish off the outside of the house. I'm not doing the windows until I actually do the room that they go into, because it's easier to do the wallpapering before I put the windows in. So the windows will go in as I paper the rooms. This door is just sitting here loose. It's not actually installed, and I just don't know what color to paint that door. So that's, and again, I would not put that in until I wallpapered either, but I really can't figure out what color. I looked up the colors that would have been typical of that era, and already I'm way off with the blue. That's not typical of the era, but I don't know, this house just said blue to me. So, you know, I'm sure, I mean, there's a purple house that I pass by every week that I think that is such a weird color. So people do use unusual and uncommon colors in their houses, so I'm not going to fret about it too much. But it seemed like dark green and black doors were really popular in the late 20s, and neither of those appeals to me. Dark green would look silly, I think, and black, no, I don't. I just, with all the white trim, I don't really want a black door. So I don't know what I'm going to do there. I'm going to have to think about that. I think the outside of my house is going to look a lot more modern than the inside, but hey, willingly suspend your disbelief, right? So that's where we stand with the doll. Okay, I have all the trim on the outside. It's all taped up and drying. Finished it up there too. I had originally bought trim to put on this side of the dollhouse, but I'm holding off on that because I'm not sure if I want to just put flat finish pieces on this side of the dollhouse, so that I can attach some sort of like acrylic panels or something to this to keep the dust out. We have a really dusty house because of the type of heating system we have, so this like really needs cleaning right now. Everything in here is so dusty. So I'm not sure I'm going to put the pretty trim on this side. I haven't really decided yet, but this I'm considering the inside of the house, which I'm going to deal with after I deal with the outside of the house. So that's where we're at with that at this point. So I'm spending the evening just going around sanding these corners a little bit. What I'm going for here is just not to have sharp edges. I'm kind of rounding them into each other so that it feels smooth when I run my finger over it like that. Sorry about the camera bouncing. I'm holding it instead of using it on the tripod just so I can get really close in here. Okay, and one thing I want to point out, I did not get really nitpicky about like making my ovals line up perfectly. As you can see there, and this one happened to line up pretty well. I probably should have tried a little harder to make those those ovals join up a little more precisely. But I didn't, so that's okay. Maybe on the next house I'll do that a little more carefully if I do something like this. I'm also just kind of rounding inside corners just slightly if they need it, just to have them join up a little bit better. I'm realizing as I look at this that there's sort of a I don't know. It's almost like there's a top and a bottom to this, because you see how here it's thicker and then thinner, and then here it's thinner and then thicker. And that's not something I looked for or noticed when I was putting this on, so there are some places where the joins are even a little sloppier. And I'm going in with the sanding detailer and just kind of gouging that in a little bit better and smoothing out the bottom a little bit better. I'm just not going to worry about it. I don't think anybody's going to really focus in on that too much. Yeah, so here's where there's kind of a sharp edge right here. And I'm just going to smooth that like that. Round it out. As I've been working on this, there were a couple of spots that I had to re-glue because I hadn't quite glued them well enough and they were coming loose. So we have some pieces over here that are re-glued and retaped. So I'm almost done with the sanding, and that will probably be it for this evening. And then hopefully tomorrow I can get the wood filler into all of these spots and let that dry. And with a little luck, I'll even be able to touch up the sanding on those spots where I had the wood filler once it's dry. Okay, making progress. I'm filling in some of the joins along the top. particularly want to have this groove right here and this groove right here continue around all the corners. So I'm making sure to get the tip of the sander in there. And then just, you know, any little excess bumps and lumps of wood filler. Getting rid of those. I'm sorry about the wobbly camera here. It's not really a better way for me to do this. But that's what I'm doing there. And then I'll touch this all up with paint. Trying to do a perfect job here. This is just impossible. I would have had to have done this better from the start to make this perfect now. But I mean, right now I'm obsessing about it a little bit. I'm feeling like, oh, I should have matched all these dots. I should have noticed that the strip of dots wasn't exactly in the center and that one border is a little bit thicker than the other, and made sure that I matched them up perfectly and all that sort of stuff. But in the grand scheme of things, when you get this whole thing together and this whole house all decorated, all aged the way I want it to be, I don't think people are going to look at that and be offended by it. So it's easy to get a little bit obsessive about some of these things, especially when you're working in such tiny detail. It's like, and I think you go through life and like you don't really see these little details like this, but somehow when you start working in this miniature scale, this 112 or 124, whatever scale you're working in, it changes your perspective. You start to see things so differently. And I don't know, like all of a sudden a quarter of a millimeter becomes huge. One of the things I want to start doing is making things out of trash or found items for the dollhouse, and I think that also affects how you look at stuff, because all of a sudden, you're throwing away a cap, or you're throwing away a wrapper from a chocolate or something, and all of a sudden you're seeing it as some completely different thing in a completely different scale. So it's like looking at the world in through two completely different lenses. It's kind of fun, kind of interesting, sometimes a little overwhelming, but it's all right. So the trim is done, and I love the way it looks. There are things that I would have done differently. One thing is the edges of these flat boards. Some of them were a little bit rough. The MDF ones were pretty good. The others appeared to be some sort of a plywood or something that was a little bit rough on the edges, and in some of those places the trim didn't lie up really flush against the edges of the board, so I had to go back and touch up the gluing a little bit. So I don't know if there was some way that I might have smoothed out the ends of those. Maybe if I had just put a coating of wood filler on them and then sanded it back or something, I'm not sure. But that's something that if I do this again and I had those kind of rough, raw edges, I would have to think about that. That said, I do think that I did get these glued on pretty securely. If I just go around and kind of check them, they feel like a good solid attached part of the dollhouse now. I do wish that I had paid a little more attention to the beads in the trim and made sure that the joins, the beads kind of lined up in the joins a little more perfectly. I mean, I'm not really hung up about it. It's, in the grand scheme of things, nobody's really going to notice that, but that's that sort of like little extra detail that just takes things to the next level, and next time I would try to pay a little more attention to that. The miter saw worked well. The guillotine cutter did not, so I don't recommend doing that kind of a long cut. If I'd been able to put the pieces flat, and cut them that way, that would have been nice, but it's because I had to cut them, up and down this way. The miter saw worked much better, and I was fortunate that even with the unusual angles that I had to deal with here, there were angles in my miter saw that matched up with that. I don't know what you would do if your angles were different from the ones in the miter saw. Probably what I would have done was used whatever was closest and then either sanded the end a little bit to shape it better, or filled it a little bit with wood filler if I had to do that to try to make it meet up. I don't know. Mitering is hard. I hope to someday be good enough at it that I can do a video with a lot of techniques and strategies for coping with miters, but they're miserable. They're beastly. And I mean, I know a friend of mine who does this kind of work in real houses, and he said it's a beast even for him, having done this for decades. You know, it's still, mitering's a beast. So let me think, what else? So I did do 2 initial coats of paint on the beads. That was good, but once I got them up here, I could still sort of see the darkness. Maybe I could have left that because that might have made this beaded detail stand out a little bit more. The darkness that I'm referring to is the dark markings in the wood where the laser cutter that they do these with burns into the wood. That's the downside of laser cutters. I would love to have one someday, but that burned thing. Here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. You can see how there's this darkness where the laser cutter has shaped the wood here. Cut that out. And if you're dealing with furniture or something, you know, and you want to stain it, kind of out of luck. That's just not going to take stain the same way as the rest of the wood is. So someday I hope to have a laser cutter, but yeah, that'll be an issue for me. But in the end, because I did have to sand and fill this and touch up the paint, I did go around and do a 3rd coat on everything, and it looks really finished. It looks really nice. There's some little bits of, you know, things that I'm still noticing. They're like, oh, you know, I need to sand that a little bit or touch that up a little bit. A little glue bubble here, for example. A little bit of glue that oozed out. You know, I'll check those things and touch them up at some point. I'm not going to fuss about that now. But overall, I'm really happy with how it looks. It was not cheap to do. These wood strips kind of cost a lot of money, so I, you know, bought a few at a time, and you know, kind of blew my budget for my dollhouse budget for a couple of months on these. But I really just think it gives the house a very nice finished look, and I can't wait until I have all the windows in, the doors, the railings up here, and then I can put some, I'd love to put some like window planters on some of these windows and things like that. I think it's just gonna look so nice. So let me bring the camera in so you can see kind of a close-up of those beaded trims. And just take it around. So, oh yeah, a lot of junk piled on top of the dollhouse, but my paint job is less than perfect. It's really hard to get that perfect. I'll probably go and touch some of that up a little bit more and get the blue back down to where it should be. But I just really think that it gives the house a nice finished look on the edges, and I'm happy that I did it. Alright, so that's it for this video. The next video I'll be dealing with the railings that go on these flat roof pieces up here. As I said before, I'm really dreading that project, so it's gonna be, yeah, it's gonna be interesting, but come along with me while I figure it out. Talk to you soon. Thanks for being here. Please like and subscribe.